Hey guys, Freddy here. Welcome back to another Retro Adventures. The end of another week, and the end of another poll. We've got a very definite win for The Stars Are Right for Call of Cthulhu Now. Now, as usual, I'll cover that on the desktop in a wee second, and I'll be back at the end of the video with some other channel-related stuff and some other poll-related stuff. But I'd like to take a moment before I do that to talk about my Patrons, who this week have absolutely maxed out their intelligence. And it's with this incisiveness that they've chosen to back me. And it's so much appreciated. Their generosity is absolutely knows no bounds. Because this contribution allows me to spend longer making these videos than I'd normally be able. So if you'd like to join them, and you'd like to help the channel out, or you'd like to see these videos a week early, or you'd like to get one of the other offers we've got, such as becoming a real honest-to-goodness fake Laird of Scotland, or joining a librarian status, where you can see all of my role-playing writings free of charge, then there's a Patreon in the description down below. If you could check that out, it'd be very much appreciated. But anyway, let's have a look at The Stars Are Right. So, this is The Stars Are Right, which came out in 1992 from Chaosium for Call of Cthulhu. Now, it's obvious that these videos are very much stream of consciousness. I don't have a script that I work from. But I do prepare. I obviously look through the books ahead of time, read up on them, refresh myself, especially on this one. I've run a few of the adventures in it, so I'm pretty darn familiar with it. But some of the adventures I haven't run, so I did need a refresher on. And I do think about what things I'm going to mention. And one of the things I was going to mention was when the current day setting for Call of Cthulhu came out, it was originally called Call of Cthulhu Now. And then as they went into the 1990s, they updated it to Call of Cthulhu 1990s. And I remember thinking at the time how stupid that was, because they were basically trapping it to just one decade. As soon as the year clocked over into 2000 and they kept publishing books, they would have to change it to Call of Cthulhu 2000s, and everything else would look out of date. But I'm now very torn on this, because the adventures in this book are very much a 1990s time period piece. You know, it's become historical, because obviously there's no internet in common use for people to research things on. Mobile phones aren't really a thing, especially when this was written in the early 90s. So it's become a period piece. But one of the reasons I was going to mention it was because so many of the elements in the stories in this book seem to me to be 1990s. But when I sat down to think about it, they are still very current. Because some of the themes of stories in this are things about kids running away from home and following a heavy metal band. And that seems very up to date as well. If you updated it to kids having to run away from home because they're following a band, to they're having to run away from home because they're coming out as gay or they're coming out as trans, you're talking about modern day, ending up in drug addiction, all that kind of things. While its trappings is 1990s, the themes in the adventures of this are still very up to date. So I'm thinking that the 1990s one is valid for the historical time period, but the adventures themselves can easily be updated to modern day. Anyway, I'm wittering on for ages already, and I haven't even looked at the back of the book. Now, we've got a quote from H.P. Lovecraft. "My identity is bewilderingly cloudy. I seem to have suffered a great shock." But I'm not going to read all that, because I am not a classically trained actor, and I can't do it justice. Call of Cthulhu and its supplements have won dozens of awards from the game industry. Editions include French, Finnish, German, Italian, Japanese, and Spanish. Stars Are Right, 7 1990s adventures, astrological data on the rise of Villiers. The Taste of Ashes. The late 20th century, a time racked by violence, racism, AIDS, drug abuse, and all-consuming fear. Hollow politicians offer empty promises of a bright future, 1,000 points of light which none can see. That which is greater than mankind lurks beyond the rim of human consciousness, patiently watching, waiting to assume command of our destiny, preying upon the fearful, the hateful, and the hated. Dark thoughts and emotions are set free to prowl the earth, taking what they will, where they will, and as they will. We cower in our homes, quaking behind the false security of tall fences, locked doors, and television, but to no avail. The stars are right and cannot be denied. Azathoth, Cthulhu, Daloth, Groth, Yogolnak, Yog-Sothoth,
These voices heard by those whose fears have led them to the brink of madness and beyond. The Stars Are Right contains 7 modern-day adventures that explore the pit of man's fears and the darkness of his soul. And then we've got a bit about Call of Cthulhu, the pronunciation, Call of Cthulhu. Cthulhu? Not quite how I say it. I make the U differently. Now, that write-up makes it sound fantastic. 7 disturbing tales of mankind's corruption. Now, these are fantastic adventures. Some of them are absolutely brilliant. The updated version of this, which came out in the early 2000s, has an extra 2 adventures. Now, I haven't read those, and obviously they're not in my 1992 copy, so I can't really comment on them. But the ones in here are fantastic. Now, inside, we've got a typical picture of Howard Phillips himself, the man. We've got intro page credits, contents, and an introduction. Talking about Call of Cthulhu 5th edition. Then we're on to Love's Lonely Children. Now, this is a story, the one that I mentioned, about a kid who's gone disappeared because she is following a band. And they track down her body to a drug den in a very rundown part of the city, Caulfield Park. And there's Honeysuckle Rose, a prostitute. And basically, the adventure goes back through drug dealings. You know, we've got Graham the Fixed Norbert. Looks a very sleazy 90s drug dealer there. We go through the band itself. The Squat, Matthew Piper, an addict. Looks like he's having a great time. And then we go back to the dead girl's family, Hammond's Adult Books. We find out that her parents are vile people who have become possessed through interactions with the occult. And it's not a happy story. And now I've run this, and it's gross, and the players had a lot of fun getting rid of the girl's family at the end, because they absolutely disgusted them. Nemo Solus Sapit, which is an interesting one, playing very much into Call of Cthulhu. Because in Call of Cthulhu, your investigators find out shocking secrets and end up going insane. And they end up going into an asylum for treatment. And this adventure is all about a psychiatrist who has been speaking to people who have learnt the secrets of the occult, of the mythos, and has become corrupted from finding out these secrets himself. And it's a very interesting play on it. A fairly standard Cthulhu investigation, but very interesting in that it plays out that the psychiatrist has been corrupted through his treatment of people who had also become corrupted. It's got the Blasted Valley, where one of the Elder Gods has been summoned and absolutely destroyed the area, and there's a big summoning of Azathoth at the very end. Fantastic adventure, really interesting exploration, I think, of the way that the mythos has had an effect on the world which it's set in. You know, even though the psychiatrist didn't set out to investigate the occult, he got dragged into it. It corrupted him. This Fire Shall Kill, another adventure I've run, which details a bunch of firemen who are summoning fire angels. I'm trying to think what they're actually called. But they are summoning beings of fire and worshipping those. And because they're firemen, they obviously are having a reason for being at these infernos and using the deaths that are caused in fires as sacrifices to their gods. And it leads through various dangerous situations until the players end up going into a skyscraper which the firemen are performing a massive sacrifice in. We're into something very 1990s here, but again, very valid. We've got The Professionals. Now, this is where senators Politicians have been dragged into the occult. Got details of Senator Ted McKinney, Miranda Sharp, an attractive woman 40 years old. She is considerably older and in no way human. And the corruption of a politician. This looks like a very sleazy 1990s lawyer type character. We go through the different characters, different settings as we investigate out the effects that the occult and the mythos is having on politics and the power that they gain through that. Now this is totally 1990s fractal gods, and is an interesting idea where somebody has taken the spells and transformed them into a digital format. So a computer is doing the summoning. So the computer is going through the formula and creating it in a digital fashion in patterns on the screen, which appear to be fractals, which were very popular in the 1990s. And essentially it can summon these beings, these fractal creatures of energy, by putting the disk into any computer. And the disks are being spread around. I believe it mentions the sort of shareware community which was around at that time, and different people running these disks, and the creatures coming out in various places. And the players obviously have to get to the core of this and stop it spreading. And the Gates of Delirium. Now this is another psychiatry-based adventure. I have to admit I haven't run this one, so I don't know every detail of it. But it's based around a psychiatrist giving his patients drugs. A particular drug, the Lyo drug. And this gives them visions of other worlds. Now, treatment through drugs, I believe, was somewhat popular in the 1990s. You get lots of people who like to experiment and expand their consciousness through drugs, so I can definitely believe a psychiatrist would be looking into this. But the drug in particular gives them visions of another world. And if you know anything about Call of Cthulhu, you know that's not going to be a good thing. Visions of other worlds lead to insanity and things coming through. And that's the setup of this adventure. But as I said, I haven't run it, so I don't know exactly how it plays out. One I have run is the final adventure in the book, Music of the Spheres. Now this is one where the players get called out to the Great Cruciform Array in Nebraska. Now this is a satellite dish array listening to deep space. And it's built on, or the one in the story is built on the real science of using multiple dishes gives the effect of having a much larger dish. And this cruciform array is set across kilometers, so it's like a massive dish listening out into space. And they are basically listening to one of the elder gods' slumber, Garoth, I believe. And this has effects around the world. Events around the world. The keeper should punctuate the strange going-ons in Nebraska with news of similar Groth-induced occurrences around the world. Because what the players are doing in Nebraska is affecting the entire world. And the other people who are interested in stopping this is the fungi from Yuggoth, who turn out to be perhaps the strangest but best allies the players can have in this adventure, because they do not want the world falling to an elder god, because then they'll end up with a really bad neighbour, because they like manipulating humanity. It talks about the climax, but then we get into it. Welcome to Hayden, Nebraska, because the sounds that they're bringing through, the songs of Groth as he slumbers, are going to be driving people insane in the local area. So becoming quite familiar with the town is important, as people will be starting to behave very oddly in the town. Carry on through the apartment, and we've got the Great Plains Cruciform Array, because the apartments where they're investigating somebody who's died at the array, they are investigators after all, but they investigate the array, and this is listening in. So we've got all the details of the control tower, the administration buildings, all the characters, some fabulous little drawings here. I really like the tone of them. And lots on the fungi from Yuggoth. As if the harmful effects of Groth's music weren't enough, a second mythos menace appears on the scene. A small band of Migo have been attracted to the area by the disturbances. For reasons of their own, the fungi seek to stop the facility's continued reception of Groth's signals. They have no desire to see the old ones awakened at this time and plan to stop the activities in any way they can. And they will work along with the players. But obviously this is going to have some kind of sanity effect. We can see the Migo there landing on one of the satellite dishes. We've got chaos. So as the Song of Garoth affects people, different things which happen, deranged motorist, rooftop madman, earthquakes, lightning, murderous mobs, the afflicted, victims, crazed riflemen, vandalism, fire, destruction, explosions, just so much going on. And this builds up to absolute chaos, riots in the town at the conclusion as they have to shut it down to save the world from falling into madness. Has a massive effect on the world and catastrophic effects if the players don't defeat it. Although, of course, the Migo might just nuke the site from orbit, as it's the only way to be sure to solve the problem. And finally in the book, we've got When the Stars Came Right Again. Basically, it's a study onto the position the stars were in when Rillier rose in the story The Call of Cthulhu, and mapping out when it's likely to happen again, which of course will be soon, because the stars are nearly right. Got Cthulhu for president there. I think we see this every time there's an election. Various forms to send away and get Chaosium books. And that is it. Now, these are a series of absolutely fabulous adventures. Some of them are so brilliant. The couple that I've run a few times are fabulous. Love Lonely Children has such an effect. I do dip into that on a regular basis because the way it treats the underground, drug addicts and all that are dealt with very skillfully and in a very emotive way. And This Fire Shall Kill is fabulous as well. There's a lot of good adventures. Fractal Gods is fairly dated, and Music of the Spheres is absolutely epic. Probably could have been an entire book in itself.
So that was The Stars Are Right, and that won the poll this week on some 34% of the vote. A full 10% ahead of Judgment Day for the Judge Dredd role-playing game, which came in on 24%. And it was only narrowly ahead of Queen Euphoria for Shadowrun on 22%, both of which I'd have loved to have covered. Now, rather sadly, City of Angels for Twilight 2000, something else I'd love to return to, came in on only 11%, and Operation Rapid Strike for Top Secret, a 1980 adventure, came in on only 9%, which was really sad because it had come second a couple of times in the past Retro Adventures polls, but it never won. So really sad to see it doing so badly this time. But anyway, as usual, they're all cleared out of the poll, and we're back to a Retro RPG one. And this time I decided to look back into history and see which were the 5 oldest games and supplements which I'd put in a poll which had never won, and put them up against one another. And first of all, we've got Terra Counter Terra for Millennium's End. An absolutely amazing sourcebook for a long forgotten game, which is absolutely brilliant. Then we've got Cold Hands Dark Hearts for Big Eyes Small Mouth. Now this was very much a joke in the first ones, as it always lost. I kept putting it in, but it would never win. So let's see this time. I'm guessing it won't win again. Then we've got the Capital sourcebook for Mutant Chronicles. Now, while I've got a few Mutant Chronicles sourcebooks, for some reason it's the Capital one I keep putting in, even though people have told me it's probably the least interesting of those books. But Mutant Chronicles itself is absolutely fabulous. It's basically Doom the role-playing game. Heroic soldiers working for large cyberpunk-type corporations defending the solar system against demons. So I would like to look through the sourcebook. Maybe I should pick one of the others in a poll fairly soon if this one doesn't win. And then we've got the Arms and Equipment Guide for Star Drive, the Alternity role-playing game. Now, I'm a latecomer to the Alternity role-playing game, but for some reason I bought this way back in 1998 when it came out. I never had the role-playing game, don't know why I bought a sourcebook for it, but I did. So it'd be interesting to put that into a video. And finally, we've got Rift's World Book 5 Triax and the NGR, which is a very interesting book. It strikes me as being more Japanese in style, lots of mechs and things, even though it's based around Germany. But I really like this book. There's a lot in it. It looks absolutely fabulous, so it'd be wonderful to cover it. But they're all in the poll, and we shall see. Now, as usual, I've been writing away and publishing things on DrivethruRPG, and I'll put a link down below. But all of those are available to patrons of Librarian or Laird status. So if you'd like to view all of them without having to go on DrivethruRPG and pick them up one each, then that's in the description down below as well. Over on RPG Gamer, well, I've started working my way through Season 3 of The Mandalorian. We got all the reviews for Visions out of the way, and I've decided that doing too many reviews at once is too much. So I'm working my way through the stats for The Mandalorian, and I'll come back to Young Jedi Adventures after I've got those out of the way. But before Ahsoka turns up, and I have to review that as well. But with all that, I think I've whittled on for quite long enough as usual. So thank you very much for watching as always. But most of all, you look after yourselves, and I'll catch you later. Bye now.